Is back in the spotlight this morning. One of our top stories today, a group of illegal miners still underground at the Randley shaft in Roodepoort. This is on Gauteng's West Rand. We have emergency teams there, including Joburg's Emergency Medical Services, the South African Police Services Search and Rescue Unit, but you also have the Mine Rescue Services. They've all been deployed to that disused mine in Florida. There were desperate cries of trapped Zamazamas heard echoing from the shaft. Now, there have been calls by some for the government to address this by legalizing artisanal mining and transforming abandoned mines. So let's pick up on that conversation piece with Benchmarks Foundation researcher David van Wyk. Good morning, David. Welcome to the program. Thank you very much for your time. Maybe we start here. Rescue operations, I've explained to our viewers, underway to save those who remain trapped underground. You've got teams from Joburg's EMS, SAPS and the MRS. They're all there after the cries were heard. But it does seem like a markedly different response to what we saw recently in Stilfontein in the Northwest Province, where largely volunteers and civic groups led the rescue and support mission. Your thoughts on the response here in Gauteng?
Yes, it is definitely a different response. I think that perhaps we are learning from our experiences in the Stilfontein area. I think it's very important that we respond quickly to these situations and that we do take people out from underground. The area where this occurred is just south of the old Randfontein Rugby Club, which is now Jerusalem informal settlement. That settlement has lots and lots of people who are working in these mines illegally. The mines are all along Main Reef Road, the old Rand Leases mines, the old Durban Roodepoort deep mines, Vogelsfontein mines, and so on, with lots and lots of very dangerous shafts everywhere. And consequently, children can fall in there, animals can fall in there, adults can fall in there, and of course people can go down underground and start remining them. They are very old shafts, therefore they are very dangerous. A lot of the iron and so on has been taken out of these mines and sold off to scrap metal dealers, consequently making them even more hazardous to go into.
Tell us a little bit more about the resource that's left behind. Clearly, there's a reason they're being exploited in the way that they are, and in a moment we'll come to the broader issue around the implementation of the small-scale mining and artisanal mining policy. But what's there, and to what extent, in terms of the volumes that keeps it being a viable prospect for those who still want to extract?
Well, I don't think it's a viable prospect for large-scale industrial mining. These mines are filling up with water. The water level is very close to the surface, about 5 or 6 levels down. You come across water and you can't go any deeper than that. So it's quite close to the surface. These men are trapped about 60 meters down, unlike the Stilfontein case where people were close to 2 kilometers down. So yes, there is still some resources. You can still make some money out of it, but you can't make it on a large scale. You can't employ thousands of people to do it, and you can't actually spend much money going down because the overhead costs and so on of pumping out the water from these shafts and restructuring them and making them safe would be incredibly difficult. So closer to the surface, the horizontal tunnels closer to the surface is where these guys are going at the moment. The possibilities for rockfalls and so on is quite high, given that the water that is rising constantly is acidic, and so it's eating away at the substructure, the dolomitic substructure in the area. We already have in Davidsonville a problem of sinkholes. We have the same thing in Kutsong and so on, because the acid water is eating up the substructure. Now, if you are underground in those kinds of conditions, then these collapses, the sinkholes and so on, can also happen while you are there, putting your life at risk. So you can get money. It just shows the level of desperation in the country with the high levels of unemployment and so on, that people are going down. The other problem, of course, is the breakdown of the migrant labor system in the country. So you have a system which operated for 200 years, bringing tens of thousands of people into South Africa, and it suddenly stopped. And so people are still coming into South Africa, but the jobs are simply not there anymore. And people come from our neighboring states, which are underdeveloped as a result of 200 years of mining and their labor resources having been taken away for 200 years and brought to South Africa. We really have to have a comprehensive plan for Southern Africa as a whole, for SADC as a whole, to ensure that former labor sending areas do get some investment in them so that there is actually opportunities for jobs in those areas that will stop people from coming here.
And I think as you shared that particular perspective, David, the conversation has to be less parochial than it's being conducted, over the last weeks or every time this issue of artisanal mining comes up. The histories, and I think going back, as you say, historically to the migrant labor system, regionally more than just as it relates to South Africa itself, is something we have to reanimate to understand why we are where we are today. I want to come back to the desperation in the country. What we see happening is bringing again and again into the light this debate around the implementation of the small-scale artisanal mining policy, formalizing the sale of gold and other minerals and so on to government. The Mineral Resources Minister, Gwede Mantashe, recently disclosed South Africa's got about 6,000, I think was the number that he had shared, derelict and ownerless mines. And, the route that he went was stronger action needing to be deployed to fight criminal activity. But on the other hand, and you would have seen this over the last weeks, and you probably know it better than most, community activists who were saying that artisanal and small-scale mining needs to be formalized. What is your assessment at this stage of how well or not government is actually getting a move on with this, showing leadership and managing what happens, both the opportunities and the risks in the sector?
Well, I think that the government is not faring very well. The policy was lying on the president's table for about a year and a half before it got signed off. But it's not yet legislation and it's not yet regulated. There are some training programs that are happening for artisanal miners, people who have registered and applied to do mining, but it's not on the scale that it should be happening. It should be happening on a much wider scale, and it should be happening much quicker. I think that there is probably a problem of resources in the department, also of human resources. They don't have enough people to actually address this particular problem, and they need to perhaps engage with other departments, also with NGOs and civil society organizations to get on the ground. The big problem is to get on the ground. The other issue is, of course, the fact that all these old mines, every single old mine is now almost an informal settlement all along Main Reef Road, all the way from Nigel in the east, right through to Potchefstroom, Klerksdorp, Stilfontein in the west. And that was because of the living out allowance policy of mining companies. Instead of providing their mine workers with proper housing, they gave them money, and the money was then spent in creating shacks and so on around the mine. And when the mine stops, the shack dwellers take over the mine site itself, which speaks to the fact that we need to actually prevent that from happening. We need to actually retain the mine sites. We need to actually see what is there and what is available to the community and to the government itself at local government level that can be used for training, that can be used for other economic activities and so on. Mines can be very useful in the economy, even if they are now ownerless, and perhaps the government should take over that ownership when a mine leaves a particular mine and then repurpose and re-engineer the mine itself to serve other economic purposes in the community so as to create jobs and sustain jobs.
This is not a new problem, David. This has been in South Africa for so many years, decades now. Why do you think, what's responsible for government not taking on board in a more urgent fashion some of the ideas that you're sharing, some of the ideas that we've heard, communities themselves share about how they see the development and the proper exploitation through the collection of, royalties and taxes and so on around artisanal mining, small-scale mining?
Well, I think that the government was under the illusion that large-scale industrial mining will continue forever, which is an impossibility because the purpose of a mine is to take out the minerals, and when the minerals are gone, the mine itself has to close down. Mining is not sustainable in the long run. It's because minerals are not renewable. The crumbs that are left now are available to surrounding communities and to Zamazamas and other people, artisanal miners and so on. but they were not sufficient for large-scale industrial mining. So the government had to plan for a transition. We need to have a just transition in mining from a mining economy to a post-mining economy. And that's what we need to plan for. And that's what we need to speak out about publicly. We have not yet seen a just transitional plan for a post-mining society in South Africa. When the president in his summer speech speaks about South Africa's cars being exported to the rest of the continent and elsewhere, he's talking about German cars, he's talking about American cars that are manufactured under license here. They are merely assembled, they're not manufactured. We need to actually use our minerals for our own development, and we need to define strategic minerals that cannot be exported, that must be used for local development and for taking the economy beyond mining into a manufacturing economy.
Again, another conversation piece that needs to be picked up when we claim those victories. What are those victories? How do we actually define those victories? I want to go back to the dark side, though, of the artisanal mining, small mining, illegal mining, zama space. Conservatively, the cost to the economy estimated at more than 7 billion rand every year, David, including through the non-payment of taxes and royalties, and that's big. How well are we doing at targeting the kingpins? This is the real masterminds and the money behind this.
Well, this is the thing that really worries me. You know, all our efforts in terms of the security apparatus of the state is focused on the guys that are underground, and they are very badly exploited. The people on the surface who are making the real money out of this are not being focused on. You know, the fact of the matter is that the guys who are underground get supplied with mercury, for example. A 5-liter bottle of mercury is 167,000 rands. You can check it on Google. I don't know why there are companies that are advertising that they are supplying mercury to small and medium scale miners when mercury should be taken out of the equation altogether. Now, who are these suppliers who can afford those kinds of prices for mercury to supply the guys underground with mercury and thereby contaminating the groundwater, also putting at risk the lives of the people who are actually using that mercury to extract the gold and so on? You know, we are not even nearly close to investigating what is happening on the surface. Who are the people who are trading it and so on? And you know, what is the involvement of the formal mining sector in that trade? What is the involvement of politicians in that trade? What is the involvement of people in the police services in that trade and so on? That is where we should be concentrating. You know, instead of looking at the guys who are underground. If I speak to the Zamas underground, all of them say, we want to be regulated, we want to be licensed, we want to do our work legally, but we can't get rid of the people who control us, the people with the guns, the syndicates and so on, who actually force us to sell the gold to them. If we don't sell the gold, they shoot us.
Wow. David, again, you know, a story that has some urgency, and there's an incredibly vulnerable, as you've just shared with us, human face attached to the practice of artisanal and small-scale mining.